In what ways are you dying right now? Ask yourself that question, because one truth of reality that I've kind of noticed for myself is that we're in a constant process of dying, right? And that goes from the very practical, physical level to the kind of mental level, to the identity level, to the cosmic level of deep psychedelic space, what we're going to touch on in this video. Hey, I'm Bergo and this is Psychedelic Actualization. On this channel we talk about topics like self-realization, self-actualization, and working with psychedelics to live a more authentic and fulfilling life. If you're going through a process of death and rebirth and you want some support regarding this, check out my coaching landing page in the video description and we can have a chat about this. So I'm in this process of dying right now. For me, what it specifically is a change of diet. See, that's what I mean by the very foundational physical things, right? I am changing my habit of eating certain foods and I'm excluding certain foods and I'm introducing other foods into my diet just to troubleshoot the fixing of some health problems at the moment. For example, I'm cutting out gluten, cutting out the sugar, cutting out the eggs, cutting out the dairy. And it's like, all of this, I noticed, was a part of my being, a part of my identity almost. By cutting this off, I'm in this very interesting process of letting go, surrendering to the death of that version of myself that was habitually eating those kinds of things. And there I recognized this little thing, this little theme of like something has to die for something new to emerge. And we see this everywhere in nature, right? Something has to die for something new to emerge. And that dying doesn't have to be a literal death. Right? It can be like the caterpillar is dying to become a butterfly. The fetus is dying to become a human. There is a death of one form as it transforms to a new form, to a different kind of version of itself. Well, the fundamental joke is that this I that is transforming and that is dying and being reborn doesn't even exist. But just on this level, I kind of want to speak some words of encouragement that it's okay to give into this process, to trust this process of death that is happening. Especially when you're on the psychedelic path, right? You know this, you go in and you feel like, it feels like there's layers of you that are dying. And at times in the integration phases in between ceremony, it feels like a part of ourselves, a part of our ego identity, this construct that we call I, wants to hold on to old patterns, to old behaviors, to old ways of being that are ultimately maybe not even serving anymore, that are slowly dying off as we tap into and step into a more aligned version of ourselves. A more aligned and resonant and clear, radiant being that we are, right? And it's okay to trust that process and to also feel a little bit this challenge and this uncomfortable suffering that is included in the death of the old while the new is emerging. It's this continuous cycle and it just goes on and on and on. And it's beautiful how life and reality is showing this in the most beautiful ways. Especially for us human beings. It's like in the most beautiful ways all things are dying off and new things are emerging. And to trust in this process of life is crucial for that unfolding and for that blossoming of the new to be as gentle as it can be, because anywhere in life and in psychedelic ceremony, anywhere when there's a resistance and a judgment towards what's happening, we are kind of hindering the process of life to unfold naturally. So that's about it. I want to end with this, with some passages of LSD and the mind of the universe, because in psychedelic space it often also feels like this term of ego death, right? The ego is dying, and then still it is being reborn. We are reborn in psychedelic space. And Christopher Beige in his book described at the end, kind of contemplated the different layers of death and rebirth that are happening. And he describes and asks the question, what dies and what is reborn? And he kind of puts it into 4 different categories. One is the ego. So the first kind of stage in the journey is this death of our physical identity, the attachment to our physical identity. And also to our mind, to this limited perspective that we call I. And then that is dying. And then he says the next layer, the next wheel of death and rebirth is the species ego. This ego of being human. And all of the coexistence that Grof is talking about that are flowing into this. He then goes on to say that the next wheel, the next turn of the wheel of the death and rebirth cycle is the shamanic persona. So even in psychedelic space, there is kind of a psychedelic self, a shamanic persona emerging, which is even, he says, beyond archetypes. But it's like an accumulation of all our psychedelic experiences and a self-identity based on the knowledge and understanding gained in psychedelic space, which is a very interesting concept in and of itself. We could talk and will talk about hours for this on this channel in the future. But even that will have to die and is dying off in the deeper layers of psychedelic work for a new persona, a deeper transpersonal persona to emerge, which then takes on these cosmic layers, he says. And in the end, when these cosmic layers are emerging, it's kind of the universe dying to itself. I want to end this video with a quote he said in Dark Night, Early Dawn. To use Ken Wilber's vocabulary, if we are a wholen, functioning as a part within a series of ever-enlarging wholes, then the death-rebirth dynamic may have different functions for different levels of reality, all of which are being realized simultaneously. From the perspective of the smaller holon, for example, the effect of death-rebirth may be liberation into that which is larger, while the effect of the same transition from the perspective of the larger holon may be to allow it greater access to and integration with the smaller field. An event that functions as spiritual ascent from below might simultaneously function as a descent from above. Phew! That is going way deeper than I expected this video to go, right? This like cycle of death and rebirth, and beyond the ego, beyond the species ego, beyond the shamanic persona, what dies, he says, I think, is something of truly cosmic proportions. Something deep in the fabric of the universe surrenders, and in that surrender is nourished from above. Some dimension of existence, extraordinarily vast, awakens more completely to itself. And much to our surprise, the divine appears to genuinely appreciate our collaboration in facilitating this communion. And just as it is in those cosmic layers of the death and rebirth cycle, we can bring it back into our integration and facilitate the process of a part of ourselves, a relationship dying off, a loved one dies, a part of our habitual behavior or diet or way of eating and beloved foods are ripping apart and dying off as we are emerging into a new phase of our life, a new relationship, a new way of relating to our ancestors, a new way of relating to food. As that is emerging, we can facilitate that process of death and rebirth by surrendering and by trusting. And that's not always easy. That is not always easy. That's what I'm going through right now. And it's tough. It's tough. Sometimes it is just tough for the system to accept that. But there's such a great beauty in this process. As I mentioned, if you're feeling the resonance and you want some support in that process of death and rebirth on your journey of your psychedelic integration, of emerging into the highest potential of yourself, then you can check out the link in the description regarding my coaching offer. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let's die together to be emerging and reborn, being reborn into a new layer of consciousness, as it's this ever-changing and ever-evolving process of life in the background of the ever-unchanging Lord and God that is always staying the same. Thank you very much. Blessings.